meeting order, please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. Today is May 13th, 2019. Can I have a roll call, please?
Missouri? Here. Basil?
Here.
Bailey?
Here.
Patel?
Here.
Meyer?
Here.
Kraus?
Here.
Mansky?
Here. We have the minutes from April 22nd. Are there any changes? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made. Is there a second? Second. Any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Missouri? Yes. Basil?
Yes.
Bailey?
Abstain.
Burrows?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Clerk's report.
Only thing I have is total tax income received since April 22nd, $93,334.52. There's still a number of state taxes that haven't come in this month yet. That's all.
Thank you. Would someone like to make the motion to open the public hearing to consider a TIF district for the village of Beecher?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to open the public hearing for the TIF district for the village of Beecher.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Burrows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Missouri? Yes.
Pete, turn it over to you.
I'll do this quick.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Pete. I'm from Teska Associates. We are the village's planning consultants. I've been working with the village for a number of years, and we have been working on this specific project for the proposed TIF district for probably about a year now. This is the final step in the process of hopefully designating the TIF district for the village. Looks like a lot of people got the letters that I sent out. I sent out quite a few letters. Just so everyone is clear, if you got a certified letter, your property is actually in the proposed TIF district. If you just got a regular letter with a stamp on it in the regular mail, we were required to notify everybody within 750 feet of the boundary. So that was about 1,000 letters I sent out. So if you just got a regular letter, you just got notified because you live kind of close by. If you got an actual certified letter, that means you are in the proposed TIF district. So like I said, this is the final step in the process. Just so everybody is clear, this is just a public hearing to take comments from you guys. The village board cannot act on the TIF district tonight. This is just a hearing to take comments. The soonest they could actually act on this is in 2 weeks, 14 days, and they have up to 90 days. So the point of tonight is just, I'm just going to give you a quick little 5-minute presentation. I won't be too quick. I know a lot of people on the board have seen this presentation probably about 4 or 5 times now. So I'll just run through real quick, and then we'll just take questions. If anyone has any questions, I'll stay as long as you guys want. But basically what we're here to talk about is tax increment financing, what we call TIF, which is essentially an economic development tool that the village has available. It is one of the very few economic development tools through the state of Illinois. Basically, we have TIF, tax increment financing, enterprise zones. Now they have the new opportunity zones and business districts. That's really about it. So there's very few programs that are available to promote economic development. Tax increment financing is one of them. So essentially it's a tool to help local governments restore and rehabilitate properties. It's local government controlled. The program would be controlled by the village board. It's area based. It's essentially, and I'll show you a map on one of the upcoming slides. We establish a boundary. All of the properties that are within the boundary are affected. It generates revenue through property taxes. Now, to kind of put everybody's mind at ease, if the proposed TIF district goes through, the TIF district does not affect the assessment of your property. Your property will still get assessed by the assessor on the regular schedule. The designation of the TIF district won't affect how your property gets assessed. And it is not a new tax. It's not a new tax that's going to be addressed onto your property. Essentially what it does is it kind of redirects some of the property tax revenue into a special fund, the TIF fund, that can be used for specific projects, and I'll get into that in a second here. So essentially this is how it works. It's a little more complicated, but essentially how it works is, again, it's not a new tax on your property. What it does is it essentially caps the rates that the taxing districts are going to collect for a period. The TIF runs for 23 years. It essentially caps what the revenues that go to the taxing districts for that period of time. And any increase is what goes into the TIF fund. So essentially what happens is if you would invest in your property, say rehab your building or build a new building, for the duration of the TIF, the school district, the village, the fire district will continue to get their, off the base, the current level. Any increase is what goes into the fund. So you can see here, this is kind of how it works. For the 23 years, the taxing districts will all collect revenue off the base value, which is essentially the value that it is today. If your property doesn't increase over that period of time, no money goes into the TIF. The TIF only generates revenue if a property increases. The only money that goes into that TIF fund is just the increased tax revenue. So that's kind of how the TIF generates revenue. What can the TIF be used to pay for? The TIF Act is very specific as far as eligibility of the TIF and what the TIF can be used to pay for. So in that letter that everybody got, there is a copy of the plan. I have it here somewhere. This is the proposed plan. There is a copy of it on file at Village Hall, and I believe Bob put it right on the website. So if anyone wants to actually see the plan, it is available on the website. In that plan, at the end is what's called the eligibility report, and state law is very specific about how to go about designating a TIF district, and I've got, here is the proposed area. Essentially, here is the old downtown on the south end. It kind of encompasses the old downtown up the railroad tracks. This is Church Street here. And essentially what we tried to do was encompass the downtown area and the industrial area to the north. The thing with TIF is it has to be one contiguous area, so we couldn't just kind of grab this piece and grab this piece. Everything kind of has to be connected. We specifically drew the boundaries to include primarily commercial areas and industrial areas. There are a couple of scattered residential properties that are within the boundaries. Again, just for connectivity reasons, the village does not have any plans to take anybody's property. This is strictly a voluntary program. So there are a couple of residential properties in the proposed boundary, but it's essentially 90-95% commercial and industrial. And so I talked a little bit about eligibility. The TIF Act is very specific on how to go about designating a TIF district. There are 13 different eligibility criteria, and I won't get into depth on all of those criteria, but essentially, if you want to look at the plan, I go through each one of the criteria. You have to meet essentially 5 of the criteria to be designated what they call a blighted area. or 3 of the 13 to be what they call a conservation area. And I went through the whole, I walked the whole site, or the whole, back up. So I walked this whole area, I looked at every piece of property, I photographed everything, documented everything, and there's a pretty in-depth eligibility report that's attached to that plan. If anyone wants any specifics, I can get into that, but I won't get into too much detail on the eligibility, but in my opinion, the area easily qualifies according to the statutory requirements. A couple of other quick things. Here, one of the major qualifying factors when designating a TIF district is decline in assessed value. And you can kind of see here, I pulled the assessed values of all of the properties within that boundary area for the last 5-6 years. And you can see just about every year those property values have been declining. 0.67%, almost 7%, 2%, and then just last year it went up by 1%. So this is kind of the trend that the TIF district is intended to stop those declining property values, to provide incentives for people to rehabilitate properties within the area, deteriorated properties, or to redevelop properties in the area. That is essentially what we are trying to address right there. And one of the major things here is what we call the but-for test. And that goes back to that little chart I was showing with that shows the trend of values declining. The but-for test is kind of a legal test to establish a TIF. But for the establishment of the TIF district, new development would not occur in the area. So as you can see, over the last 5-6 years, there has been very little to no development in the area. Property values are declining. That's what we're trying to address with the TIF plan. This stuff was for the taxing districts. Again, this little presentation is one I gave for what we call the Joint Review Board. Again, this is kind of the end of the TIF process. As I said earlier, kind of how the TIF generates revenue is really, it kind of caps any future tax increases going to the taxing districts. So one of the main things that we had to do was we had what we call the Joint Review Board, where I sent the plan to all the affected taxing districts, the village, the school districts, the fire district, all affecting anybody who levies taxes on properties within that boundary. They all got a copy of the plan. They all had a chance to review it. And we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with representatives from all those taxing districts, and they all voted unanimously to recommend to the village board to approve the TIF district. So again, this is the final stop. I know this is kind of confusing for people, so I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. But again, this is the final piece. We're just here to present it to the public, to get comments, any questions that you guys have. Again, the board cannot act on this tonight. We just want to get your comments, and then hopefully within the next 2 weeks to 90 days, the village will actually go ahead and vote on implementing the TIF district. So that's kind of TIF in a nutshell. I know that's kind of confusing. By all means, if anyone has any questions, feel free.
Repeat one question. I remember seeing this slide. How many TIF districts exist
Oh, yeah.
in the area?
Whoops. I have that slide. No, it's not in here.
I remember we're the only community left in Will County that doesn't have one. Even Peatone has one.
Yeah, one of the, again, TIF is one of the very few economic development tools that municipalities have available in Illinois. The point Bob's making is just about, if not every one of Beecher's neighbors is utilizing TIF. Crete, Moni has a number of TIF districts. All your neighbors are using TIF districts. Essentially, when a developer comes in they're looking for that incentive. All of the neighboring communities to Beecher all have this tool available, and Beecher kind of doesn't have that
And I
tool.
would say does that mean we jump off a cliff if everybody else jumped off? the
Not
cliff?
necessarily.
But the problem is, we can't compete economically in that environment.
Right, you have two, you kind of, you're right here on the border of Indiana, so you've got challenges competing with Indiana, and all your neighbors are utilizing TIF and enterprise zones. You're in the enterprise zone as well. But it's a tool that the village has to use, and, all your neighbors are using it, so I think that's the point I was trying to make.
Pete,
Yeah.
this came in through the village hall. If I understand it, if the TIF passes, what will then happen is there'll be a line item on our tax bill that would say TIF. So, and then if they weren't, in other words, my house isn't in the TIF, okay, but my taxes went up, so then you had that window. The same amount of money would appear in both cases, follow me? You would see how much money is going towards a TIF, but if you weren't in the TIF, that would be in your regular tax bill.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right, it will show up as a line item like another taxing district on your bill. But if you look closely at it, you'll see that all of the other line items, the school district, the forest preserve, the county, they all get capped at the current level. So any increase, just instead of going to the school district, it goes into the TIF fund. Instead of going to the Cook County or the forest preserve, it goes into the TIF fund. So it will show up as another line item on your tax bill. It's not another tax. It's just kind of reapportioning where those taxes are going once you pay them. Yeah.
So say if you have a building in the TIF district, you wanna make some kind of improvements on your property or your business or whatever, what sets priority to your, like what you wanna do compared to say, a new developer wants to acquire a piece of land to build a factory on, and does he get priority, or like how does that work as far as?
Well, you would,
allocating the funds?
essentially, you would come to the village with what you're proposing to do. There's kind of two ways how TIFs work. Originally, how they were set up, we would establish a TIF district, and we would project out how much we anticipated the values to go, and then a municipality would actually take out a bond. They would borrow that money, and then they would put all that money in on new streets, new roads, doing all that infrastructure work up front to induce development. That's not what we're proposing here. What I typically always recommend is kind of a pay-as-you-go thing. So initially, the first couple of years, there won't be a big pile of money sitting in that TIF because, as I said, how it generates revenue is off the increase in property taxes. So if nobody's putting any money into their property, if values aren't going up, it's going to take a couple of years for any money to go in there. So typically how that would work is you would go to the village with your project, this is what I'm proposing to do, and you would enter into some type of a redevelopment agreement where you would pay those upfront costs to do the development, and then the increment that got generated on the back end, you would work out an arrangement with the village that they can reimburse you for some of those costs that you but the developer would have to do it up front.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and then is there, I know like some TIF districts, they're limited to like just the facades of buildings or like different, ways that you're allowed to spend the money into the TIF district. What are the, like, cause I read your whole paper thing online. It didn't really say about, it gave an example of like, some interior improvements or facades or whatever, the fascias. And I was just kinda curious of how they.
Yeah, who decides where the money's spent?
Yeah.
The village decides. The control of the fund is through the village board, so you would come to the village board. What you can spend that money on, the TIF Act is very specific on what you can spend that money on. It's typically infrastructure improvements, environmental issues, streets, roads, sewer lines, that type of thing, rehabbing an old deteriorated building. One thing that it cannot be used for is for new construction of a new building. So the village can't leverage these future tax revenues to give to a developer to construct a new building.
I thought there was something on there for land acquisition.
Land acquisition, site preparation,
So you can give them money to
utilities.
buy the property?
You can use it for land acquisition, yes, but not for new construction of a new building.
Okay.
it can also be used for public improvements, to benefit the whole area, is that correct?
Yes,
I'll give you an example, like the village board decided to put the boardwalk on Gould Street and spent 50 grand on that project. If we had a TIF district, we could have used the TIF money for that specific project, to
absolutely,
improve that downtown.
absolutely. And you're talking about facade improvements. That's a very typical program that most communities that establish a TIF district will establish what they call a facade improvement program, where they'll do like a matching fund kind of thing, where if you improve the, and I don't want to speak for the village because I don't know what kind of programs they're going to set up, but that's just a typical one, where if you would, you know, redo the facade of your building, the village would use TIF funds to, like a matching grant type thing. You put in X thousand dollars, they'll match it.
I'm sorry, I was a little late, but as far as the money being generated, it's all gonna come out of the taxes that are being increased to everybody in the TIF district? Is there any
Yes.
money coming from the government at all?
The money strictly comes from property tax revenue. It only comes if a property increases in value. If a property
The
does.
increase in taxes on the property is where the money's gonna come from, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. I didn't know if there was any money coming from the state along with this program or from the county or, so it's just within the county?
No, it's strictly generated off properties within the boundary, and it can only be used on specific projects within the boundary of the area.
Speaking for the drainage district, and we take assessments from some of the properties in the TIF district, will we be affected at all?
I
wouldn't
don't
think
believe
so.
that's the case, Dennis. I think you still get your per acre. Because you're not taxing.
We're not taxing, we're assessing,
Taxing on an
but
acre.
I just want to know if there be
Yeah,
any
this-
caps on us.
Yeah, this doesn't actually affect the assessment. It just kind of affects, once the property owner pays the taxes, it just kind of diverts some of that money away. But it does not affect the assessed value of the assessment, how the assessor does that you should be fine.
But we don't use assessed value.
Well, how do you generate?
We just assess so much an acre or a property.
Oh, yeah, that shouldn't affect you at all.
Is there any other questions?
Yes, sir.
So if the properties that get reassessed because of improvements, that only happens on the properties within the TIF, not any of the other properties. If you're not in the TIF district and you do improvements, you're not gonna get reassessed, and none of that money goes into the TIF. It's only within the TIF district?
Well, I mean, whether you're in the TIF or without, outside of the TIF, your property's just gonna get assessed as it normally does. The only money that goes into the TIF fund is just properties within the actual boundary. But every property is still gonna get assessed normally by the assessor every year, and the TIF's not gonna affect his schedule or how he assesses the property.
To rephrase the question, I believe you're asking if someone improves their property outside the TIF's not getting that improvement money, and they're not. You gotta be in the district. So if you improve your property on Dixie Highway, and you're not in the TIF district, that money goes to all the taxing bodies, that increased value. It doesn't go into that TIF account.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
if you're in the boundary, like if you got a letter that you're in the boundary, but you didn't get the certified letter that you're in the district, is that true of those places also?
No, the only reason I sent those, only if you got a certified letter are you
Right,
actually in the TIF.
boundary.
Everybody else is
Is
just
outside.
within 750 feet, and we just sent you a letter because
Let
you
you
might
know.
be interested to know what's going on
Okay.
within 750 feet of your house. It won't affect you at all.
So if I got a boundary, I'll call it a boundary letter, not a certified one. If I built a garage, my extra taxes on that does not go to the TIF then?
Nope, it'll just go,
Just the normal?
just normal, absolutely.
Routine?
Yeah, only the properties with
Directly
actually
in.
directly in, and then that money can only be spent to rehabilitate properties in that boundary.
Gotcha.
I'm in Prairie Park, and I think part of the, I'm out by the retention pond, and I'm on between the retention pond and Route 1, there's a lot of farmland. And it looked like to me on one of your charts, it looked like it was zoned as yellow, which was commercial. So when I moved in, I assumed, yeah, eventually there's gonna be a strip mall or something in there. But, and if that does happen, if that is part of the thing, is there any kind of a program to work with the subdivision to put vegetation or some sort of barrier to kind of hide, you know, the back of, say, a strip mall or something? Because I moved out to the country, you know, and now I see this happening, and I don't know, you know, when I'm leaving Earth, so I don't know exactly, you know, how that's going to happen. But I mean, I'd love a tree line there now, but obviously there's not. But is there any kind of a plan to put shrubbery or something to kind of just?
You know, that would be the kind of thing that would get worked out as a development came. That is certainly something that the TIF could help fund. Those kind of any type of landscape screening or fencing or a berm or whatever, depending on what type of use it was and how much buffer that you needed. But you know, that would be something that would be worked out when a specific development came, and Bob would work that out through reviewing the site plan. But those are the types of things that the TIF could help a developer fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned this was, if the board approves it, it's good for 23 years.
Yes.
At the end of 23, do they renew it, boundary, or what happens?
Well, all right, so 23 years is the typical duration of a TIF. It can be closed out any time sooner than that. 23 years is the maximum. It can be extended for up to 12 years. The village can't just extend it. The only way to extend it beyond that 23 years is it has to be approved by the legislature in Springfield. So that's kind of difficult to do. So typically it runs for 23 years. Kind of the goal of the plan of creating a TIF district is those taxing districts are kind of foregoing the immediate increase in property taxes to invest, to use that money to invest to induce new development. So they're kind of giving up in the short term, and then ideally, if the TIF is successful, at the end of that 23 years, we've used that money to rehabilitate and rehab and do all kinds of new stuff within the area so that the EAVs will be much higher, so that the taxing districts will benefit from that increase at the end of the 23-year period. That's kind of the goal. Yes?
Oh, we own a rental property that is within the TIF district, right on Dixie Highway. Is any of the explanation that you just gave different? Will it affect us any differently because it's a rental property and it is a residential property at this point, even though it's zoned commercial?
Yeah, like I said, we tried to not include any residential where we could. There was a couple that we just, to draw the boundary, we had to include. You know, this doesn't affect zoning. Your property is currently zoned what it is. You can do what the zoning ordinance and other ordinances. This doesn't supersede any of that stuff. This is just, it's kind of an overlay district on top that provides the village with some incentives to induce development. It's not forcing you to do anything, so you're good to go. Should you at some point in the future want to redevelop, it's a tool that, or even rehab the building. You know, this is a potential source of revenue, but it's not going to affect. As long as it's legal, as long as it's a legal rental, then you should be fine.
Okay, let me ask you this. She said she's got a rental property in there, so the TIF money doesn't have to go towards commercial? It can go towards a residential home, or there's no guidelines?
It can go, yeah, it can go to commercial, industrial, residential.
Whatever's in that TIF district, money can go towards it, right?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't have to be a commercial?
No.
It could be for residential, okay.
No. The one thing to keep in mind with residential, and again, you know, the majority of this area is focused towards future commercial and industrial development. If there's residential development that gets funded through the TIF, there's a special provision to kind of make up to the school district. So if you use TIF money to incentivize a new apartment building that generated X number of students, and now we're capping the school district property tax, there's a provision in there that, you know, if you add students through the TIF funding, then that TIF money goes back to reimburse the school districts for the additional students. But otherwise, it doesn't matter. Yes?
I'm curious, you mentioned neighboring communities were the last to incorporate a TIF district. Can you give us an idea of some of the successes that the other communities around us have achieved because of the TIF? What might we expect with this TIF, based on what other communities in the area have achieved?
Well, you know, I'm not gonna promise that the TIF is gonna produce anything specifically, but I can tell you, I worked with Moni on the last TIF that they did, and bringing that Amazon facility in there was dependent on establishing that TIF district. I've worked with some very successful ones, more, you know, closer to the city. Bedford Park did a very successful development that generated a bunch of, there's about 12 to 15 hotels that got developed through the TIF. It's kind of an industrial area up by Midway. TIFs have been successful. Chicago uses them extensively, I'd say creatively, actually. And it's used in urban areas, highly urban areas. It's used all throughout the suburbs. It's been used successfully, as the gentleman here was saying, talking about residential. Peoria and Springfield have used it pretty successfully in some older, historic, just strictly residential areas. And they set it up just as a program to help homeowners rehab their houses. So it can be used in a wide array, from big towns to small towns. And it can also be abused, so
There's a couple closer to home, it's south end of the creek, there was new commercial property that was built, Dutch American Foods, the trucking company next to it, city of,
Called LMN.
yeah, LMN, the trucking company that's there. Look at Mantino, all the work that was done in Mantino was all part of a TIF district, all that downtown area along the tracks. That's probably the best success story probably in the area that we would know of, probably Mantino.
Okay.
How would a TIF district not be successful? What would make it
well,
not work?
as I mentioned earlier, there's kind of multiple ways you can do it. The way the village is doing it is what I said was a pay-as-you-go, where you know, the developer and the village would have to come to some type of an agreement. The developer would upfront the costs. If his development actually produced that increase in revenue, then the village could reimburse him for those eligible costs. The other way to do it is to take out a bond up front and say, the TIF over 23 years is going to generate X million dollars, and we're going to bond for that, and then we're going to spend all that money, and then if you don't actually generate that much increment, that's when you can get in trouble. So,
Then the taxpayers are in the book.
yes.
That's not our.
Right.
When you say bond, they're borrowing the money, right?
Right, and that is not the case here, but I'm saying that's how you could get yourself in trouble, is if you borrowed the money up front and then you didn't spur the development, and now you're left holding the bag.
You use it before you get it, so.
Exactly.
Are there any other questions? If not, George Scudamore, you signed up to give some oral testimony. Would you like to address the board?
Well, I figured I'd sign in as usual.
So I can scratch it off. And I'm sorry, my handwriting is bad, but I can't read the second one on here either. Even though I have bad handwriting in Cypher, I don't know who it is. Gary Carr?
Oh, that's me, I thought you said the same thing.
Okay.
I feel better now.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? That's what we're here for.
Yes.
We had received a certified, but our property is rental, but it's zoned commercial. It's not residential. It's used as residential, but it's zoned commercial. Does that affect us any differently?
Is that the smokehouse you're referring to?
Pardon?
Is that the smokehouse?
Well, no, it's the house.
Your neighbor
And
to
the neighbor.
the north.
Okay. That is in the TIF district.
Right.
It is zoned commercial, and you can continue using it as residential as a legal non-conforming use. If that makes sense. Now, I'll give you a scenario where residential may occur in the TIF. You might have first floor retail on Gould Street, and the second and third floors might be residential. That's the new trend with the younger generations, that's what they want. And that's one instance where TIF money could be used to develop the commercial property, even though there's 2 floors of residential on the top.
Any other questions? Is there anyone that wishes to speak in favor of the TIF district? Is there anyone that wishes to speak against the TIF district? With no other questions, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Roll call.
Missouri? Yes. Bates?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Doctor?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. You're welcome to stay the rest of the board meeting. And if there's anyone else who wishes to address the board meeting,
See ya.
The meeting's going, right? Fine. We're staying.
And I was gonna come tonight.
Chip something with an old cat on the table.
if I may, please, we have a meeting to conduct. Start out in the lobby.
Oh, why didn't they show up?
Why are they not here? If they-
Not interested, I think.
Well, there is no,
If you'd like to stay, by all means, otherwise it's blocked off in the lobby.
unless we're talking about the contra truck.
Is there anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board on any other subject? At the Village Commission, Beautification Commission. Matt?
Meeting tomorrow night's been canceled. We had a cleanup day this past Saturday. Wish we would have had some more turnout, but we got a couple of the parks completed. So that's all I have for now.
Thanks for the volunteers who showed up that day, appreciate it. 4th of July Commission, trustee Miller.
Not much to report. I think we have a meeting coming up at the end of the month. She mentioned maybe the 29th. Yep, May 29th. Otherwise, nothing else to report.
Youth Commission, trustee Reserve.
As well, nothing really to report. Our next meeting is this Wednesday at the Village Hall at 7:30. If you're interested, please come out and see what we're about, and we're always looking for volunteers. That's all I have.
Historic Preservation Commission, trustee Whalen.
We have the ongoing plaque program, which we met, and we have a list that we're constantly going over and identifying new properties. So that's kind of where we're at. We're anticipating another order probably within the next month, I would think. We're also looking at, one thing that has never been done down there is some type of parking lot striping, with some type of handicap or parking stalls or spots. So we're gonna look at that with Matt and see what we can do as far as that goes. Our next meeting is this Wednesday, 6 p.m., so if anybody's interested, come on over, and it's at the depot. We have a good time there. Talk about a lot of history. What's coming up for the Historic Society, which is Driving the Dixie, and Driving the Dixie is going to be on June 15th. And the Society is also putting together a special display of memorabilia of Milt Pappas, and that's going to be on several different weekends. It's going to start on June 8th. And the 15th is the Driving the Dixie, and we're going to continue that Driving the Dixie all the way throughout the day up till 3 p.m. That day, the Lions Club is going to be serving hot dogs for lunch, and we're trying to get some activity in the depot, and it's going to be a little bit of a fundraiser for the Historic Society. The 22nd, again, it's going to be open. These are all Saturdays, and it's from 10 to 3. And also June 29th, we'll be there. So So come on out, especially on the 15th, get a hot dog, and Lions Club is gonna do their thing, and come out and see it. If you haven't seen the depot or the Beecher Museum, I think you would be amazed at what's there. So come on down and get there. So that kind of ends my report.
Finance and Administration Committee, trustee Beecher.
All right, treasurer's report, Donna?
The total of the village accounts at the end of April, $2,724,527.25. The total of the commission accounts, $195,610.52. Total of all combined accounts, $2,920,137.77. The ending balance in general, the end of April, $504,946.22. If you notice, I added another item on this report, the interest earned for the month. First Community checking accounts in April earned 2% interest, which was quite interesting. The month before, we also earned 2%. The interest has been on the rise. So, and just to kind of give you an idea of the difference, in the calendar year 2018, we earned $10,330 in interest. The first 4 months of this year, we've earned $15,149. So, we're kind of riding the wave, which is nice. Let's see, for the commission and non-AP payments, for the month of April, the total was $2,751,138.91. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was a lot of year-end transfers, as well as, you know, large payments to IHC and Baxter and Woodman, which had been pre-approved by the board. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions of the treasurer's report? If not, I'd like to make a motion to approve the treasurer's report for the prior month, fiscal activity for the prior month.
Motion on the floor, and there was a second. Any questions or motion? Roll call.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Whaley?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Yes.
Various reports for the preceding month are enclosed for your review. And the approval of the bills for the prior month. There was some came in Monday, Ariel Labs for $90. Becker Automotive for $166.30. Call One for $29.26.19. Cannon Cochran for $321.73. Constellation Energy for $20,134.54. East Jordan Iron Works for $105. L&H for $563.07. There was one more.
There he is.
There it is. Will County Treasurer for $258.06. Any questions of the bills for the prior month? If not, I'd like to make a motion approving the bills for the prior month for $261,746.40.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any questions on the motion?
I just have one quick question on my total. It has the total here of $261,746.40, and here it's got $271.
I forgot to change it. That's a text box.
Okay.
That's what that is. When I added the bills today, I didn't change that bottom.
Which number is it on?
It's the text box. It's probably the one that's totaling out. 261. The text box should be less.
Yeah, the
We'll
dark
have to
shaded one is
investigate
the,
that. Approve the 271, not to exceed 271, we'll figure it out, because the text box should be less. If I punched that in on Friday. So I don't know why the text box would be 10 more than the total. It's just a typo.
Okay, so the motion and the second, we're okay with that, we'll see 271.
271, 746.40.
Any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Missouri? Yes. Basil?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes. That ends my report.
Thank you. Public Buildings, Properties, Parks and Recreation, trustee Young.
Okay, the field number 2 lights in Fireman's Park are now operating. How's that going? Have you heard anything as far as?
We had a couple initial complaints about the lights, just not getting used to it, but then it died down after this.
Okay. And also getting them turned off at a certain time? Okay, good. All right. And that ends my report.
Finding Building and Zoning Committee, trustee Missouri.
Okay, the building department monthly report is enclosed for your review. And Planning and Zoning Commission will be meeting on Thursday, May 30th at 7 p.m. to review the working draft of the comprehensive plan and determining if the plan is ready for public hearing. The public hearing is scheduled for Thursday, June 27th at 7 p.m., at which time the commission may make a recommendation on the plan. The village board will consider the plan at the July meeting, provided how that works out. That's all I have.
Public Safety Committee, trustee Kraus.
Thank you. The police, EMA, and code enforcement reports are enclosed. Status for the full and part-time officer staffing, I don't know if everyone saw last Thursday. We hired 5 officers, 3 full-time, 2 part-time. 2 out of the 3 full-time are just to replace existing spots we had. One of them is a new hire, new position that was created with this budget, and then the 2 part-time officers are just adding officers that we lost. And that's all I have there.
Public Works Committee, trustee Kapors.
Water Department monthly reports, along with Sewer Department monthly reports, are enclosed for your review. The water billing register is also enclosed for the months of March and April. Gould Street Water Main Design Update. Baxter Homewood has begun negotiating with UP Railroad over permit fees and safety requirements to be followed when the contractor bores underneath the railroad tracks. This could potentially increase the cost of the job to the village by $25,000 to $35,000. A bid opening date of June 4th at 11 a.m. has been set, and then the village will have 120 days to consider an award. The committee will meet on, the plan is to meet on June 17th at 7 p.m. to review the bids and decide how to proceed. The project can still, like we discussed, be broken up into 2 phases. We didn't budget for this. We had no idea where to even begin the budget with the different options, whether it would be anything, if it would be 1 phase or both phases. So if we do go ahead and move ahead with anything, we'll have to amend the budget and do an appropriation. Other than that, there's enclosed material. Anyone have any questions on that? Thermoplastic project. The project has been scheduled by Superior Road Striping. Matt, you got a start date from them, or I know it's all weather dependent.
They showed up this morning.
Showed up this morning.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be done by the end of the week.
Okay. And then also, while we're on that, in the committee we discussed Penfield, with Penfield being torn up in hopefully 2020 for the SPP project. Matt had gotten a number to just go ahead and, rather than do the thermoplastic, paint it. So that way there's still at least signage approaching the schools for slow crosswalks and stop bars. But other than that, I mean, it's just waiting, and then we'll have to have them come back and do the thermoplastic after the road's done.
Right.
But, consider authorization for payment in the amount of $805,044.52 to IHC for work completed in the Beecher wastewater treatment plant, pending receipt of IEPA loan funds. That's just the newest bill from them. So I will go ahead and make a motion authorizing payment in the amount of $805,044.52 to IHC
for work completed on the Beecher wastewater treatment plant pending receipt of IEPA loan funds.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There is a second to the motion. Any questions? Roll call.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Consider a motion authorizing an extension of 10 weeks to IHC for the wastewater treatment plant improvement project. Their letter request is enclosed. It's very reasonable with the weather that we've had. It's the best thing to do. No need to try to rush them to hold a schedule and corners get cut or anything, so I think it's a smart thing to do. I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion authorizing an extension of 10 weeks to IHC for the wastewater treatment plant improvement project.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
A second, any questions of the motion?
Is 10 weeks what they're anticipating, or is that just like a buffer?
10 weeks is what their anticipation to be at the substantial completion that's required.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Missouri?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
All right, on the same subject, consider a motion authorizing payment to Baxter and Woolman in the amount of $30,558.25 for construction management services related to the wastewater treatment plant improvement project. That also is pending the receipt of loan funds from the IEPA. So I'll go ahead and make a motion authorizing payment to Baxter and Woolman in the amount of $30,558.25 for CM services related to the wastewater treatment plant improvement project pending the receipt of loan funds from the IEPA.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second to the motion, any questions? Roll call.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Basil?
Yeah.
Missouri?
Yes.
All right, wastewater treatment project plant update. Bob, you got an update for us?
Yeah, we had a meeting last week. We're progressing well. The 10 weeks is not only due to weather, but some of the equipment that was ordered was not supplied in a timely manner, and I don't think it's fair to IHC to hold them up for that. We did have some problems with our bypass pumping, and Matt, have all those problems been resolved yet, or are we still trying to get that bypass pumping issue resolved?
We're slowly getting there.
We're getting there? Okay. Other than that, the plant is proceeding well, and if you walk down there today, you wouldn't recognize the place, it's totally different. And we will have a grand opening, a ribbon cutting, and an open house and walkthrough sometime this fall, hopefully before the weather gets too bad. When it gets too cold, but that's the plan.
All right. Consider authorizing the village president and clerk to sign an agreement with Baxter and Woolman Engineers for the Phase 2 design of Penfield Street from Dixie to Reed in the amount of $308,000. The federal SDP program will be reimbursing the village 8%, which equates to $246,400 for this design fee. And the village's cost will be approximately $61,600. There is $369,000 in the infrastructure account to pay for this at the time. There'll be about $300 left in there after the thermoplastic and what's already budgeted for is spent for curb and sidewalk replacement projects. That account brings in about $20,000 a month. There's sufficient money in there to go ahead and move forward with it. We had other options with this. The committee, me and Stacy had met on it. We had other engineering firms give us their qualifications and towards this, and it's just, they started this project at Silly to switch an engineer mid-phase. So we're gonna stay with them through the end of this project on this one. So I will go ahead and I will make a motion authorizing the village president and clerk to sign an agreement with Baxter and Woolman Engineers for Phase 2 design of Penfield Street from Dixie to Reed in the amount of $308,000.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, any questions? Roll call.
Missouri?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Parkway tree planting program. Matt, you got an update?
That's been completed as well.
Awesome. Last one, consider a proposal from Robinson Engineering in the amount of $55,000 to conduct a Phase 1 assessment of lead service lines in the village and apply for IEPA funds to replace these lines. This is something that got brought to the committee. We had a meeting this week and discussed this. Nobody knows where the state's gonna go as far as mandating lead service line replacements within the village. Everybody knows what happened in Flint, and as these things progress and as we move forward, I personally believe that there's gonna be mandates. And unfunded mandates, it's the way of the world. It's what happens, and unfortunately, we'll be looking at a time where we'll be mandated to do this. Currently, the IEPA has created a loan program for this with 50% loan forgiveness. If we go ahead and move forward with this, basically if the project costs $1 million, you'll be paying back $500,000. This is something that's good for our residents. The IEPA claims that the village has 194 lead lines in use within the village. What would happen is with this phase one, Robinson Engineering would come in and they would do an assessment of all the lead lines, give us an official count. And what they would do is they would have to obtain, if we move forward with this, they'd have to obtain a temporary easement from each homeowner. And unlike other projects, this would actually be not just the service line from the main to the B box. This would go directly into the house. It would replace the lead line all the way into the house. What is on the inside of the house would still be left to the homeowner, but the village can go all the way into the house to the meter. If the homeowner refused to sign that temporary easement, nothing would happen. The job, that main wouldn't get, or that service line wouldn't get replaced, and it would just, their address would be reported to the IEPA. What would happen from there, who knows? Robinson Engineering was progressive. They approached us on this, and talks began, and this is where we're at with it. I think it'd be good to get that official count. If we move forward with this phase one, it's $55,000 to conduct the assessment, and figure out exactly where we stand in the village as to what's out there. At that point, once the Robinson Engineering knows what's out there, they can give us an engineer estimate on what our costs could be, obviously, and then we would have to go to bid. But I think it'd be smart to go ahead and get on this. This program, the IEPA is just rolling it out. I'm sure there's limited funds to that, so it's gonna be on a first come, first served basis. So the quicker we can act on this, the better, I think. So with that being said, there'll be time for discussion, but I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion approving a proposal from Robinson Engineering in the amount of $55,000 to conduct a phase one assessment of the lead service lines in the village, and apply for IEPA funds to replace these lines.
Motion on the floor, and a second.
Second.
There's a second under discussion. We are in Springfield. The EPA did in fact bring up this program to roughly 40 other communities. And like Trustee Kaporis just said, it is one of the hot topics that has to be addressed in the future. And I think it's a good idea, just under discussion. Any other discussion?
Do we know if we don't do this now or don't get it now, are they going to do this again in the future?
Like he said, there's limited funds. The more people that apply, the less chance you're gonna get, or you're gonna be on a long waiting list.
Yeah, I think once they mandate that everyone in the state has to do this, it's on your nickel. Right now, since it's voluntary, they're willing to pay for at least half the program. Once it goes mandatory, I don't think the state's gonna pay for it. They're gonna tell all the water supplies, you do it. And at minimum, we're gonna have to tell EPA an accurate count with proof of where these lead lines are. Right now, we're just giving them a number. They want a number, they want a photo of where the pipe comes into the meter. They're gonna want some proof of where we're at. And at least with this study, you're gonna get that done. So even if we don't qualify for funding, right now we do, at least we'll have the assessment done, the inventory, which is gonna be required by law.
Did they have a timeline on their assessment?
As far as what?
As far as what we're, the motion to approve that? Get this back to see how many lines exactly.
Oh, when they would get it done, I mean, the sooner we approve it and get it to them,
It's
I
gonna
mean,
take 6 months, because they gotta go into almost every house in the old part of town.
the sooner they can start on it.
Check the meter. And if we had to do it with our public works guys, Matt, you might as well take 2 guys and assign them for 4 months to this, so.
Any other questions?
One last one, where's the is it 55,000 coming out of, what account?
That's something we discussed. It would probably come out of, initially it would come out of water sewer debt, which has got
It's not budgeted, so we're gonna have to do a year-end adjustment to. the
supplemental
budget.
appropriation.
Yeah.
What I was getting around to?
Yeah. Right now, water sewer debt's sitting at about 1.1.
The money's there, you just have to figure out
Yes.
the logistics later.
Yes. And how we're gonna fund the loan payment and the actual project. But to get this started, there's $1 million sitting in water and sewer debt. So that was the committee's recommendation, that we take it out of there and go and do a supplemental appropriation and move forward with it.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Whaling?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
That concludes my report.
I don't need to pen tomorrow morning, you can see that already. Economic Development Community Relations, trustee Meyer.
Spring newsletter has been mailed out, and it was a nice hefty newsletter this time. Sesquicentennial update, we're still waiting on some prices for a laser light show for Saturday, August 1st, 2020. The original fireworks low show option was $12,000, but we decided to go in a different direction. It wasn't gonna give us much of a show, and it's only a month after the 4th. We figured we'd try to get something different that was maybe a little bit cheaper, we shall see. But that's all I have to report.
Just for your information, I requested quotes from 4 companies and none of them called me back.
Oh, really?
I'll try again.
Okay.
Right, under my report, item number 1 or 2 are pretty self-explanatory. Item number 3, would somebody consider a motion postponing the July 8th regular meeting to Monday, July 17th, and canceling the July 26th meeting?
So moved.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Roll call.
Missouri?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Whaling?
Yes.
Rose?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
As far as Lobby Day in Springfield, if you've been watching the news, all the things that were told were gonna happen, did in fact happen after the fact. A lot of discussion about an infrastructure bill or capital bill, marijuana, legalizing it. There was some discussion about the 3rd airport down in Springfield, and so on and so forth. With that, leading into item number 5, we were approached again by individuals that, if you remember when they legalized the manufacture of marijuana, we approached the board and said, would you consider such a thing if provided it covered all the laws, which included it had to be 1,500 feet away from the municipality, from any residential property. With the now medical dispensing, which could include recreational dispensing, we were asked if we would consider to have, if we would approve a dispensing store in town. And with that, I did not get any direction on that particular subject, so I thought I would ask you guys tonight what your thoughts are. You've already been approached.
You have been approached.
Yes.
For, I'm sorry, you say?
Well, the first,
Yeah.
it just so happens that the same person that approaches for the manufacturing has now approached us saying, would you consider it dispensing? And if it is gonna be dispensing, it's my understanding, even if you approve medical, it automatically will become recreational, both if in fact this law passes as it is being suggested now.
I would say, like anything, you gotta get the facts and present it. I mean, I think it'd be foolish to rule anything absolutely out without any information. I mean, me personally, I mean, I'm willing to listen to anything. And if it makes sense at the end of the day, you know, we'll have that debate and that discussion if the time comes to it. You know, you gotta see what first of all, it's gotta pass, right? It's gotta get through the state, and the state's gotta sign the bill approving it. If it does, from everything I've heard, you're looking at probably at least a minimum of a year after passage of the law for them to, be able to actually put it into effect where people are actually able to do it and that, so, I mean, let's see what comes of it, let's see what the taxes are on it. I mean, if anything, what are the financial benefits the village would receive by having it, you know, or not having it, and, but yeah, I mean, I think like anything, I'm open to discussing anything, so, I would never rule anything out without any sort of facts.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I would agree, I'm not automatically opposed, but I would definitely wanna see more information and, you know.
One of the things that they are pushing is local control, what revenue we get out of it, whether or not we can say no, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of lobbying being done for local control, to put it in general terms.
Max, that would be my other question is if it's, you know, by rights, right, if we have areas, in town which absolutely nothing to do with TIF district, there's still other areas in town that aren't even in TIF district that are zoned commercial, and if this is a commercial application that they're doing by right, unless something changes with legislation on that, I mean, how much of a stay do you have? I mean, without a lawsuit coming at you that this property is zoned for what I wanna put here, and by state law, this is allowed, how can you tell me no?
And I believe that those are the items that are in discussion, as far as zoning and so on. So-
The one discussion is you can opt out by saying that you will not allow any dispensaries in your village limits, and state law will give you that option, but you cannot opt out of possession or use. So just because you opt out of selling it, you can't tell somebody they can't smoke it or possess it. So that, and there were some mayors that were of the opinion that would be allowed, and the municipality could regulate that, and you can't. The state law is gonna allow possession and use statewide. And then there's the issue of private plants too. If you opt out of a dispensary, can a resident still have up to 5 plants in his basement? And it sounds like you can. So opting out isn't total opting out.
Whoever started this, or whatever the case may be, we've heard 2 presentations, I believe, on it, and there's been some extensive work done on this already. So, I don't think if it passes, I just think it's a matter of time.
Let's hear what they have to say.
The powers that be want it. There are some legislators that have formed a group that are opposed to it, and one of them is in this area, DeLuca. He said, I'm not voting for this, I'm opposed. So we don't really know how it's gonna shake out, but I think the minority is opposed. The powers that be seem to wanna do this.
And I believe the Illinois Chiefs came out against it, but I believe it's the language, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, they provide language for us to talk about kind of stuff.
The problem is if you're driving under the influence, you really can't detect it with marijuana.
They're working on some tests.
They are.
So they oppose the language of the bill, not the bill itself.
Correct. I believe their stance is they know it's coming, but let's get our wording in there to try to work with the legislation so we can get a little bit on the chief side. I don't think we can stop it, so.
Any old business come before the board? Under new business, I have 2 items. Last Thursday, I had the pleasure of addressing 3rd graders for approximately 30 minutes. That brought back memories of my kids back when they were in 3rd grade. Very unique that day, and I was actually amazed and proud of the teachers that we have in the school on the questions that the kids asked. Term limits. The whole thing started out by saying, did I come to the school in a limousine? No, I didn't come to school. So, what do you drive? I drive a pickup truck. Oh, cool, what kind of pickup truck? Okay. Do you live in a big house? No, I don't live in a big house. How much do you make? But,
Did you tell that one?
yeah, I did.
No, not here.
It was was interesting, and I was happy to be there. The second thing I'd like to read, and it's a proclamation in honor of the 50th anniversary of Municipal Clerks Week. Specifically, I'd like to declare Municipal Clerks Day, May 14th, 2019, which is tomorrow. Whereas the office of Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas the office of Municipal Clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the office of Municipal Clerk provides a professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever minded of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. Whereas the municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. Whereas, I didn't write all these whereases, by the way. Whereas municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of affairs of the office of municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. Whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of municipal clerk. Now therefore, I, Greg Samansky, Mayor of the Village of Beecher, in recognition of Municipal Clerks Week of May 5th through May 11th, 2019, proclaim May 14th as Municipal Clerks Day, and further extend appreciation to our municipal clerk, Jeanette Connor, and deputy clerk, Patty Meyer, for their vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the Village of Beecher. I would entertain a motion to support this proclamation.
So moved.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Questions? Roll call.
Kraus,
Yes.
Meyer,
Yes.
Brooks,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Basil,
Yes.
Missouri, yes.
One writing, do we need an exec session?
I was just going to ask you.
Yes,
Sorry, you're making that motion.
yes, I'd like to request, executive session to discuss the hiring of, a new public works.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Roll call.
Missouri? Yes. Basil?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.